Salute, Nick family. Welcome to the Queen's Court. I'm your host, Stephanie, aka Queen, and as always, we have a lot to talk about. The Knicks were 1-2 this past week with an overtime win against Chicago. Two losses, to say the least, to put it mildly, against the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Boston Celtics. So tonight we're going to talk about what's the difference between the Knicks and those two teams. What accounts for the difference in those teams? Is it just chemistry and playing together? Is it just this roster is just not as good enough? Is it the bench? Is it coaching? We'll talk about all of that. But before we get started, we're going to pay tribute. Jeff, you can take it away from
Well,
here.
it's all we always talk about Nick's family, and it's difficult when you lose one of your own. And not too many of us probably knew Al Trautwig personally, but every time we turn on the MSG network, his voice and his face was there, and that familiarity makes it feel like we're losing one of our own. And so prayers to his family for comfort and at a tough loss. He was only 68 years old. It's younger than my dad, so he wasn't very old, and he held it down on the pregame for a long time for the Knicks, and so he'll be in the pregame with the All-Stars in heaven now. So we appreciate everything that he did for MSG and for the Knicks, and you will be truly missed, Mr. Trautwig.
For sure. And if we could just do 10 seconds of silence. Yeah. Yes. All right. Not to make, yeah, I won't say that. I was going to say from one from one death to another, but I'm not going to say that. We're going to say that.
It feels like a funeral, doesn't it?
It feels like a funeral, right? When we're talking about the Knicks and many of the fans' hopes and expectations for this season. Before I get into the questions, Jeff, just give me your overall feel of the Knicks. If you want to do it just from this past week, if you want to do it from the past season, however you want to, this season, however you want to do it, just what's your feelings right now?
Well, I guess if I'm going to talk about that, I need to start with before the season began, I really thought that this was a team that could make it to the Eastern Conference Finals. That was my expectation, and I didn't really even contemplate anything other than that. And this was even before we traded for Cat, and it was the Bridges sign was already in the books, but at that time, but not the Cat trade, and so. But at that time, I really didn't anticipate Cleveland being as good as they are. Whatever they're doing there, it's working. They've got the best record in the league. They're very difficult to beat in their own building. I think they've only lost there 4 times all year. Coach Atkinson has them, those bigs and those littles playing seamlessly, which is very impressive. But to keep it with the Knicks, I kind of feel like what this weekend told me is that our ceiling for this season is kind of cemented at second round. I don't really see a pathway for, unless a significant injury or something, unforeseen happens. But all other things being equal, I think that this is the ceiling for this team right now is a second round exit. And that wasn't the result I was hoping for at the start, but progress isn't always linear, and there are lots of things that we have to work on, but I think we need more data to kind of see to answer some of those questions that we're going to get into, because I'm not sure that the answers are 100% clear after 57 games, even with 0-7 against the elite. And we talked about this a little bit before the show. I don't think I've ever seen a team profile like this one, where we're so dominant against almost everybody else and so lackluster against the best of the best. I'm not sure that it's ever happened in the NBA in my life. remember a team with such a stark contrast. I mean, night and day as to
Yeah.
how well and how poorly they play. So uh,
Yeah.
I don't think it's easy to really identify, or I mean, you could blame one thing or the other. I think probably the truth is it's a mix of all of those things, and we kind of have to figure out what the proper configuration for this team is going to be moving forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. Shout out to the chat. State dropped by. Appreciate you on Dios NYK. JJ always rocking with us. Audi 100, Mike Edmonds, Daniel Berry, Sports Highlights, Ally Wise, Keith Turner. What's popping, Keith? Um, good to be back. I missed 2 weeks on the Queen's Court, and I miss you guys. I miss you, Jeff. Appreciate you holding it down on Dope Soul Sports Talk, and I definitely miss the chat, and I'm really interested in what you guys have to say about the Knicks tonight. I think um, to start where you started before the season, um, eh, for me, it was I need to see because championships are built. Like you can't just put a roster together and win a championship. Like you kind of have to go through some things. You have to see where how things mesh, and you know you make changes as as you go along. And I think what became apparent to me is that the Knicks are just not as good as Cleveland and Boston. And we'll get into how far away they are and what's accounting for this big difference. Because there's one thing to say, well, listen, we've played them 5 times and we've only beat them once, or we played them 4 times and it's 1-3. But to not get any wins, it's still early. We still have some games to go, and the nature in which we've lost these games, it feels like the difference is huge, right now. But we'll get into that. But I think those two teams are better, and I agree with you. It, if those two teams are better, then how are how in order to get out of the second round, you have to beat a team that's better than you. I'm not saying that it can't happen, but I know a lot of us before the season was Eastern Conference or bust, or if we don't get out the second round, it's a failure. But I don't see that happening, unless things turn around, and it can happen. It's 50 something. It can happen, right? But for right now, I don't see it. I see the Knicks, losing in the second round to a better team. Um, I can't say I'm super disappointed though, because I don't think for me, I didn't think that the Knicks were going to win a championship in the first year. I thought it's possible. It was possible, but I didn't think that it was going to happen. So I'm not feeling like super disappointed. I feel like this was a year to see where we stack up, and we still have more time to go to see where that is, and then to make the necessary changes if we can in the off season. And I know a lot of like we'll say we're stuck, but we're not stuck. Like you can trade OG Ananobi if you felt like you needed to. You could trade Hart. You can trade Bridges. I think you're stuck if you feel like you want to keep that starting five together and you only want to trade around the edges. Then yeah, you don't really have a lot. But if you're willing to trade, a starter because you feel like, you know, this rendition of the team is just not going to do it, the Knicks have assets, right? They have
Absolutely.
assets if they're willing to um, go into that starting unit.
And they've shown that they dealt Dante DiVincenzo right before training camp. So I don't see any reason to believe that this front office is married to the Super Friends.
Right, right. But let's get into these two games. W- The Knicks got blown out by Cleveland. Like that score was Knicks 105, Cleveland 142. I think that's what 37 points. Boston 105 to 118. The Knicks were able to bring it within 4, and it took no time before Boston went on their run and pretty much ended the game. So I guess my question is, are those two teams that much better than the Knicks in your opinion? Are they, let's just say, 20 points better than the Knicks in your opinion?
Well, Bill Parcells used to say, "You are what your record says you are," and if that's true in this case, that means that they are. I think that we haven't done a lot of things strategically well that could account for some of that, but
Mhm.
mostly I guess you said you weren't disappointed, and I am. And I'm
Mhm.
not as disappointed that we went 1-2. Like losing in Boston and Cleveland, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. They're two of the best teams in the league. It's how we continue to just not be able to compete for extended period of times in these games that's troubling to me. And in the Boston game, it really felt like, how you have a younger sibling or a cousin, and you're faster than them in a race, and you run in a race and you sprint out way ahead, and then you kind of look back and you gauge where they are, and then you just let them catch up a little bit to get a little bit of hope, and then you just dust them down the home stretch. That's what that Celtics game felt like to me. Like the third quarter, we had that big run, but I kind of feel like Boston just kind of took their foot off the gas. And if they had wanted to, I think they could have, won by a similar score to what Cleveland did, but there wasn't any need to do that. So it's very bizarre that this team is so good against everybody else and doesn't look like they belong in the same court as those top. Well, throw Oklahoma City in there as well, because
Mhm.
the results against the Thunder were identical.
Yeah. What do you think the difference between the teams are? Do you think it's chemistry and not being together long enough? Like Boston has been together, their core has been together for 3, 4 years. Cleveland's core has been together a few years. Do you think it's coaching? Do you think it's execution? Do you think it's roster construction, bench, or something else? Like, what do you think the difference between the Knicks and those two teams are?
Can we say D, all of the above?
Yeah, yeah,
Because
you
I
can.
I really feel like it's a lot of that. But let's go to the Boston game for just a second, because
Mhm.
I found something interesting. Uh, do you know that Tatum shot below 50% from the field, and so did Brown in that game,
Mhm.
and so did Kristaps. So three of their top five players shot not just below 50%, but well below 50%. But Drew Holiday and Derek White. Derek White was like 5 of 6 from three and 7 of 10 overall, and Holiday was 2 of 4 from three, and so they got this big Burt boost from those two guys. And it's just kind of like you have to pick your poison, and what doesn't matter which one you pick, it can still kill you. And so I really feel like, especially in that game, that was really evident that they just have they just pose more questions than this current roster can provide answers.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that goes away simply. I personally, I probably would have started Deuce, but I don't think starting McBride is bridging a 20-point gap either, just to be clear. But I
Mm.
think it does help with some of the issues as far as spacing is concerned. I think that having a threat, non-perimeter threat on offense against a team like Boston is killer. Like, because they just exploit that so well, and it makes Towns' job nearly impossible, because that double team comes straight off of that to he or Brunson, and so they have to work extra hard, and we're just like, you throw the ball into Precious Achiuwa in the corner, and it's like, who cares? Like, if he
Yeah.
makes the shot, he makes the shot. And
Mm.
Josh Hart shot like 8 of 14 from the field in the Celtics game, and we still lost by 13. So obviously that's a strategy that works, even if he gets close to a triple double. And Boston didn't even shoot dramatically better than the Knicks in that game, as at least compared to the previous two times when they were absolutely lights out from the perimeter, and if they do that to you once, you say, oh, well, statistical variance. But when it's happening every single time against every single one of these big name teams, there's got to be something more to it than just, oh, statistical variance. They just got hot and made shots. I don't believe that's the case either. So and in the Cleveland game, they remember that playoff series from 2 years ago. They remember it. They were embarrassed, and they are on a mission to show that that's a thing of the past. And it was a motivator for them. And, certainly we were on the second night of a back-to-back, and we didn't have, some of our best talent out on the floor. Even so, that shouldn't happen. There are a lot of questions. I'm not sure I have very many good answers for them, except to say we're in trouble if we have to face one of those teams in the second round, if everything stays the way it is right now, which is no guarantee.
Yeah. I will say this, particularly when it comes to Boston. To me, with Boston particularly, in my opinion, is roster construction. Like, Boston doesn't really have a lot of weaknesses on offense and defense. Boston poses problems for the Knicks that the Knicks cannot pose for Boston. So, for example, Towns gets double teamed. He's passing it to Precious. Okay, all right. You know, you get Tatum to pass the ball. Whether they didn't double team him, but for whatever reason, you get him to pass the ball. It goes to Brown. It goes to Brown is not a good 3-point shooter, but it goes to Derek White. You know what I mean? Like, everybody on that team can do something with the ball, and the Knicks just don't have as many defenders. And I'm not making excuses for the Knicks, but I'm just schematically, the Knicks just don't have as many defenders. Cat is not a defender. Brunson is not a defender, and Boston has 5, right? Defenders, switchable at that.
And that makes me think that Mitchell Robinson isn't much of a solution, because we've seen him struggle against Boston in the past, because what Boston does is what they do so well. They're going to ignore Mitchell Robinson, and they're going to put the pressure on the people who can beat you. And like, if Mitchell Robinson had 20 points against Boston, they wouldn't care. Like, first of all, he's probably not going to do that, because all he does is putbacks and dunks. You can get a few lobs for him, and he will do some things on the other side of the floor as far as, preventing layups and those sorts of things. He can do that. But I'm just not sure that the calculus is all that different, just because on offense, we still have the same weaknesses that we had in the last 2 or 3 outings.
Yeah. And I think the other point I want to make is the Knicks are a top-heavy team. So your starters got to be on all 5 cylinders to win. Like, the Knicks have played just 6 different starting lineups, the least of any team in the league. They're a top-heavy team. You can't be having this is OG's first game coming back, and Josh Hart is injured. You behind the 8 ball already in that type of scenario. The next game, I think you had everybody back, but that was Josh Hart's first. I'm not making excuses. The point I'm trying to make is, if you're going to beat Boston, you're going to beat Cleveland, you need to have a good shooting night. You need to play better defense than you usually play, right? You need to be super motivated, and every starter has to be on their game, not coming back off of an injury. The Knicks just don't have the fluff, the leeway, the cushion that other teams have, particularly when we go to our bench. When we go to our bench, and bless their heart, I thought Cam in the Boston game, came in, and his energy and his shot making kind of helped, propel us back. into that game. So don't get me wrong. There are, and Deuce has been, you pointed out Jeff before the show, even if he's not shooting well, he's doing other things that when he's on the court, that team is usually a plus, whether he's shooting well or not. But Shamit may or may not give you good minutes. Cam may or may not, give you good minutes. Precious may or may not give you good minutes. When we go to the bench, it's a drop off. And I know people say, well, other teams are going to their bench, but I think when other teams go into their bench, from my eye test, they're getting a little bit more than what we're getting when we go to um, our bench. But to the original question, and we'll get Tony Crowe in here. I think the difference between the Knicks and those teams is the roster. Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby are just not playing offensively at the level we need them to play at. Because you think about it, against the other teams, we're playing 5 out, we're moving the ball around, the ball gets to OG, he hits a shot. The ball goes to Bridges, they hit. Teams are like, my good, who do we, even Josh Hart is hitting shots. Who are we get? That's not happening for whatever reason against Boston and Cleveland. And part of that is, and we're going to see this in the playoffs, when you have really good defensive teams, they can take certain players out of the game. Like you could do whatever you want with Brunson. You're not taking him out of the game. You could take Bridges out of the game. You could take OG out of the game. And now that makes it harder on the Knicks. And that's what we saw against Boston. We had a really hard time generating looks. The first quarter, our possessions was ended with OG Anunoby taking a shot against the shot clock winding down. If I'm Boston, I'm gonna take that all day long. That's what we're gonna do. You're gonna pass the ball, and it's gonna end with 5 seconds and the ball in OG Anunoby's hand. I think another time it ended in Josh's hands, and then another time um, Towns to Precious in the corner for the air ball three. Like if that's the shots you guys are gonna be getting, we did our job. We're
sure.
good, and that's what happened at least in the beginning of of that game. So a lot of it to me is just the roster. Boston's roster is just it's just better, and they just create issues um for the Knicks. Let me bring in Tony.
Hey,
Peace, peace.
hey,
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Glad I made it. I'm a little late, but I'm here.
Yep,
salute,
yep,
big
yep.
bro.
What up, Jeff? How are
Uh,
you?
Good, man.
so
Happily ever
so
clafter.
yes. So you'll be familiar with this question because we talked about it on your show, Knicks and Bruises. For those who missed that, be a part of the replay gang. Um, and that was what's the difference between the Knicks and Cleveland and Boston? Or another way to answer it is, what do you think the Knicks need to do to compete better against them? Is this a coaching issue? Is this a bench issue? Is this a roster issue? A mental toughness issue? Like, what separates the Knicks from Boston and Cleveland, in your opinion?
Well, Boston is a lot easier to pinpoint the separation. I feel like no matter who's on the floor with Boston, they don't have an offensive liability. They don't have a guy that they play that can't shoot the ball. So that makes them a lot tougher to defend all across the board. When you got Pritchard coming off the bench and he could give you, 30 points on a good night. You got Hauser coming off the bench. He's gonna knock down shots. And then so I guess for the Knicks side, it is the I hate to say it, but the roster, right? The other than and even in our starting five, we got offensive liabilities. But then you got, Precious, who has been great. Gotta give him his props for what he does do. But when you playing against a team like Boston, they're gonna exploit any liability you put on the floor every play. Every
Mhm.
player they're intentionally going after, like you said, Queen. They want Precious to shoot that three, open or not. They want OG to have 5 seconds to make a decision and shoot that shot. They want Josh Hart to shoot those shots. And until our players step up offensively against Boston, we're not going to have a shot. I mean, the defense is what it is. That you know what I mean. That's only going to get but so much better. The offense has to be on point every possession. Cleveland, I don't know how big the gap is to be honest. We talked about it earlier. They obviously still have that chip on their shoulder when it comes to us individually. Donovan definitely got some things to prove. Not only did we punk them in the playoffs, but I think we punked them in the regular season last year. It felt like you know what I mean. Like we was having fun out there when we played Cleveland, popping Donovan Mitchell's chain when he didn't play. You know what I mean? All the little fun antics that it was fun to watch last year.
Mhm.
I think this year they trying to get their revenge and prove we're not the same team that you guys beat. We learned from that.
Yeah. Um, for sure. For sure. Um, I think other than roster though, mental toughness. And I know Tony, you said this on the show earlier that if a team is better than you, you could be as tough as you want. What are you gonna do? you know, what are you gonna do? I don't know. I just would have liked to have seen a bit more energy, a bit more fight, a bit more, particularly against Cleveland, a bit more something. The Knicks just seem listless. Um,
But it has
to
to
me.
do with that start of the game as well. Like it starts that way. So we're playing behind the, you know what I mean? We're playing behind the eight ball from the beginning. You got to come out there from tip off. As soon as you jump ball and try to impose your will from the beginning.
Do you think we're getting enough from Mikael Bridges and OG Ananobi offensively? Because I was talking with Jeff before you hopped on. What made the Knicks difficult? And think about it. Now, on our offensive rating on the season is fourth, but the last 10 games, 10th. The last 5 games, 11th, and the last 3 games, 28th.
Mm.
So our offense is not clicking the way it was, and there's various reasons for that, but it's definitely not as free flowing as it usually was. Now, is that because OG was out, so we're not getting that shooting that we usually get from both wings, and we've had to go a lot with Precious Atua. Josh Hart has been out as well. But the offense is looking a little clunky. It's just not looking as smooth as I remember it. The spacing is not um there. Um, or it could be when you're playing better teams, they just know how to take things away, and the Knicks are not doing a good job responding to what is open. Your thoughts on that,
I think
and yours too, Jeff.
I hate to keep harping on the point of chemistry and how long we've been together, but I mean we can honestly sit here and say as good as this team has been offensively, what do you like to say, Queen? We leave a lot of meat on the bone. Like
Yeah.
that's it. We haven't reached our peak offensively either, as good as we are. Um Another thing about Boston in particular is I talked about how everybody can score the ball, but they're also empowered to. You know what I mean? They want Hauser to come in the game and let it fly. So that's empowering to a player. They want Pritchard to come out, like they trust them enough to go out there and perform and put up those put those shots up. I think we all know this. It takes time for Thibodeau to have that trust in every player on that roster. Prime example in that Boston game, Shamet had, I think, 6 points, only played 5 minutes, but was integral in keeping us in the game in that first half. He played those 5 minutes in the first half. In the second quarter, why did he not get back in the game in the second half?
Right.
And again, I get it. He's been up and down at best all year long, like underwhelming. You know what I mean? For the most part, Shamet has. So, can you blame Tibbs for not having that same type of trust that Boston has in the Hauser or in the Pritchard to come in and produce? So again, I think that will come in time. If granted, if Shamet is here moving forward, but his injury has a lot coming into the season, not being available for all this. That has a lot to do with it. You know what I mean? Like, but those guys on the other team on Boston are empowered to go out there and trusted to go out there and be the best versions of themselves. And whether you take it as a knock on Tibbs or not, it takes him some time to garner that trust for guys that are relatively new to this team. And then you could even say the same with Bridges. I don't think he's being empowered to go out there and try to score 25, which I think he's capable of doing. You know what I mean? Like over time, though, I think it should get better.
I don't know about Bridges though. I think Bridges has the green light to do um whatever he wants.
I don't think he's restricted per se, but he's also not used as an anchor as much. When I talk about pinpointing the mismatches, we seen that first game against Atlanta. I think it was the first game, but one of them games against Atlanta where he took Trae Young to the paint the entire game. You know what I mean? He took advantage of his size, his mid range, which is his strength, and to me that was a integral one of his best games. The next time we played Atlanta, we didn't see that at all. And again, I don't know if that's him or Tibbs.
Right.
As Shutter will say. You know what I mean? The players are obligated to find and take advantage of but again, that comes with time. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't even know if it's time. And I think this is where we get into Brunson, in my opinion. My favorite player on the team. But I think he leaves meat on the bone a lot as well.
individually or for the team?
Both. I don't think, well, no, individually, I think he does his thing. But I feel like his floor game can be a little better. And maybe I'm nitpicking, but I think his floor game could be a little better in terms of orchestrating, in terms of this is the mismatch, in terms of go over there, Cat. I'm about to give you the ball right now. No, we go on the Bridges, who's being guarded by Trae Young. You understand what I'm saying?
Do you not think that even that needs time for Brunson?
No, you're a point guard. You should know that. I don't think the coach has to put that in the game plan.
I agree that as the typical point guard, like as the position, yes. You know what I mean? If you're a prototypical point guard, but I don't think that's who Brunson is, nor who he was brought here to be. So that becomes
Even
an
a
adjustment.
scoring point guard, even a scoring point guard should be able to take advantage of mismatches. You know what I mean? And then another thing, when Cat is cooking, he'd come in and act like he's on the bench. Cat is cooking. He'd come in and just turn the fire on.
Yep.
I'm like,
As far as Brunson, right? Cat is cooking. Brunson comes in, and then it's my time. I agree. I see all that. I agree.
He has to be better.
I'm not disagreeing.
Or, and it might be too soon, a la Allen Iverson, we might have to move him to the 2 guard and bring in a point. Now, I think this is way too early. I think this is way too early. It's 50 something games into the first season of our championship window, which I think is 3, 4, 5 years long. But I think Brunson has to be better. Has to be better with that.
I'm not disagreeing. I just feel like not only has he improved in that area, especially this year, I think it's still like a learning curve. Uh, I agree with everything you're saying, because as a point guard, that's your job first, right? You know what I mean? Floor general, run the offense. But that wasn't his role here. You know what I mean? It was take over. You know what I mean? So I think even like mental, and that could go with mental toughness. That could fit right into there. Just knowing mentally when I gotta turn it on, when I gotta find my teammates and have them turn it on. But ultimately, I agree, because if he can bring out the best out of the supporting cast, his job ultimately becomes easier.
I mean, I think he does that. Like, I don't want to overstate this. Like, I think he does you know, a good job of passing off of how they, how they play him, right? These guys are not shooting well. And when they're not shooting well, then there's a lot of pressure on him to create shots and score for the team, right? So in the Cleveland game, in the Boston game, he was passing the ball. He wasn't getting anything from those guys when he said, you know what? I got to try to keep us in the game by scoring. That's what you're supposed to do if you're a point guard. So in no way am I saying he's selfish. I'm just saying there are times, just times, when he can
The
do a little better.
fourth quarter of the first OKC game, I think that's a prime example. You know what I mean? We were cooking collectively. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Arguably one of the best. That might be one of the brightest spots as far as the team collectively and our potential. And he came in and disrupted that in that fourth quarter and said it was my time. But to me, it's not. I'm not gonna knock him for it. I'm gonna say what you said though. He has to get better at it. You know what I mean? He has to get better at it. But that is a tough. I would assume that's a tough position to, you know what I mean, to kind of decipher through,
Right.
and on when it's, because if you make the wrong decision, whether you say, all right, it's not my time right now, it's daytime, that might be the wrong decision that day. You know what I mean? So and vice versa. You might come in and say, all right, let me take over, and the right decision might have been Cat's cooking, or Cat got the mismatch, or Mikhail has the mismatch. But I again, it's not me
No, I
disagreeing. I just
I
feel
hear
like
you.
he has to figure that out, and I
Mhm.
think he's more than capable of it.
Right. Jeff, what's your take? And then we'll
Well, this
get
is
to the
one of the
super chat.
reasons why I love to be on this show. Tony made me think of something that I hadn't thought of till now. But I think if you check the stat line in the Boston game, I don't think Josh Hart attempted a single 3-point shot. He was 8 of 14 from the field, and he didn't attempt a 3-point shot. Well, that feeds right into the Boston defense. You've got to at least let a couple, and it's not like he wasn't open, because they're giving him that shot. Well, if they're going to give you that shot, take a couple of them. And he's been a 30-something% shooter, so he's not terrible, but you've got to take enough of them to keep the defense honest, so that they have to, because if you make a couple of them, then they have to come out and guard you, and then you can maybe ease things up. But another thing I noticed in the Celtics game is Brunson and Cat shot 3 free throws total.
Mm,
And you know how many Brunson shot? 0.
mm.
And the only other time this year that he didn't shoot a free throw, the only one it was?
Against Boston?
No, actually,
Right.
it was against the Indiana Pacers. It was that game where he was in foul trouble, and he
Right.
didn't play but like 22 minutes, and the Knicks blew him out of the water in the fourth quarter with Brunson mostly sitting on the
Yeah.
bench. That's the only other time this year he hasn't gotten to the free throw line. So I'm not saying blame the refs or whatever. I'm just saying that maybe he's attacking the defense a little. Maybe he can attack the defense in the same way. Maybe his footwork doesn't work as well because of their length and because of their ability to double team without fouling. There's a lot. I mean, there were less than 30 fouls called in that entire game, and I think it was 11 free throws aside. So I don't think the officials determined the outcome of that game by any stretch of the imagination. But despite Bill Simmons saying that he's the best foul baiter in the league or whatever, but best foul baiter got 0 free throws. I don't know how he came up with that conclusion, but that's why Bill Simmons is Bill Simmons. But the point being that part of his game is getting to the line and getting some of those easy points. And I think he ended the Boston game with like 22 and 4 with 4 turnovers. That's not a great Jalen Brunson game by any stretch of the imagination, and so, we've got to find ways to get him more involved and to get him easier opportunities. And I think one of the ways that we have to do that is guys like Josh Hart, when they're open, they have to shoot. Like he was 8 of 14 from the field, but 0 3-point attempts. That's not going to cut it against Boston. You've got to be able to punish them from the perimeter and make them come out of that shell, make Kristaps come out and guard somebody, make it where they can't just double team Cat automatically on the catch and force him into a bad spot on the floor. And then it's compounded because Karl Towns is like an old engine. It takes him like a quarter and a half to really get humming for whatever reason. And then once he's warm, he'll take you all the way there and with no problem. He kills it once. I mean, I think he had 25 points in the second half of that, almost all in the second half of that Celtics game. And until he went out with the injury, he was trying to keep us in the game single-handedly almost. I mean, he was that good, but it just seems like it takes him a while to get going. And it's kind of a contrast from what we saw last year's team where with Julius Randle, he always seemed to first quarter was his quarter. And he took the responsibility in that quarter, and that kind of allowed Brunson to ease into the game a little more. And now we're not necessarily having that on a consistent basis. So with our starting lineup, it's kind of like in the first quarter, where are we getting our offense from? And there's not a lot of clearly defined roles of this is what we're doing or that's what we're doing. And so I think that's contributing to these slow starts that we've been having.
Yeah. Great point, Jeff. Let's get to the super chat. Shout out to Paris Duggar. I agree with 2 or 3 different people who said today, if we swap Tibbs and Boston coach or Tibbs with Cleveland coach, the Knicks would play much better. I hear you. And also, Brunson has nobody to trust in pressure situations. I hear you on that as well. Let's get into.
You agree? You agree that no one's trustworthy?
I don't. No, I don't. I don't agree. I think he does pass it to them and give them an opportunity. But I think when he sees that they not hitting, he takes it upon himself to try to keep the Knicks close. And I think that's what he's supposed to do. Like I'm not
I just got
really
one question for Jeff too. Because I agree with the Josh Hart sentiment that he can't turn down shots. But if you're choosing between turning down the shots and still being, shooting a good percentage or whatever the case, or the pressure situation where you shoot the shot and you don't even hit the rim, you know what I mean? Like, because my thing is shoot the shot but hit the rim, you know what I mean? Like, because when you shoot an air ball, that's the end of the possession. You know what I mean? There's no rebound opportunity. There's no chance for it to bounce in on a lucky. You know what I mean? Like, so it's a catch-22. Yeah, you gotta shoot the open shots. But if you gonna shoot an air ball, I'd rather you take a step in. You know what I mean? If you're gonna touch the rim or the step in, but
right. But I think Precious is different than Josh Hart, though. I think you're right with Precious. Precious there's a reason you open. But I think with Josh Hart, his 3-point shooting has been much better this season. And I think he has to let it fly because taking 2 3-pointers, even if you're shooting it at 60%, I'm still going to leave you alone. If you hit both of those, that's just 6 points. You know what I mean? Like if you're shooting a high percentage, but you're not getting up enough volume, well, why should I respect that? I can roam off of you because you're only going to take 2 out of the game. So what? You hit both of them. That's just 6. You know,
No,
I think it's his percentage is better, but the volume has to go up. And he doesn't even need to force it. Just take the ones that are presented to
yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm only saying even for because my sentiment is the same for pressures. The difference is you gotta hit the rim. Otherwise, it's just as good as a turnover. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
give
Yeah. Well, I
give
think pressure shooting a 3 is a turnover, even if it hits the rim.
and
It's just
and
not a
and,
good
and
3.
he's shooting. You know what I mean? He at least at some point he was shooting a decent percentage. So it's I feel you though.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's get into somebody made a good point, and that'll help us segue into shout out to Andrew K. He said, I still can't believe we are not 57-0. This is complete.
Comment of the night right there. Hard to
Appreciate
argue with
you.
that one, Andrew.
Appreciate you. But let me see, where was it? Andrew K also said Knicks are a very good team with many flaws. They're in that tier underneath Boston and you know, in Cleveland.
And I
Oh,
think
here it
people
is.
should stop saying can't
Mhm.
beat the good teams and just say the 3 teams. You know what I
Right,
mean? 'Cause,
right, right,
like,
right, 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 right. Yeah. Um, NYK Bro 99, we have an MVP candidate in Cat and an all NBA player in Brunson, and we still can't compete. That's a great word against the elite. Is that on the coach? What's your thoughts, Jeff? We'll start with you and then Tony.
It's got to at least be a little bit on the coach. I think, for a guy whose reputation is preparedness and having his guys ready to play, that's something we just haven't seen in those matchups. So, yeah, it's definitely a matter of concern, but I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater either. I think, we're 37-20, and he's a big reason why we have the record we do against everybody else. Now, I'm not saying that there's not another coach out there who couldn't do better, but if we're going to make that decision, I think it's got to be in the off season, because I don't think changing coaches on the fly, new systems, I just don't see that as a wise. It's like a knee-jerk reaction to me at this point. It's very emotional response. Let's let this, we're at the beginning of this journey, so let this season play out. And if the playoffs are a disaster like they are now, like we've seen to this point, then we have that conversation. Maybe we do let him go. But Mike Malone wasn't a championship coach until he was. Same with Budenholzer. How are Miami Heat fans liking Eric Spoelstra right now? Doc Rivers has a championship. Is that a coach you want on your sideline? He's not one that I want. I'm not saying so. I don't even know who the coaching candidates that you want to replace him are. I don't think you can just say insert warm body X and we turn into this juggernaut against those teams, because I don't think that's true either. So I'm going to preach patience on this, but as far as lighting a fire under that seat, I don't have any problem with that. I think it's justified, but I think that we need, I don't think that most of the time in-season coaching changes don't work. Look at what happened with Milwaukee. They had the rookie coach. They were going along gangbusters. They had a record similar to what we have now. They fired him. They brought in Doc Rivers, and they were considerably worse from that point forward, because a new coach is a new voice. It's a whole other list of adjustments. And oh, by the way, our all-star player And most of our roster really loves playing for Tibbs. If you don't believe that, just listen to them on the Roommates podcast and other places. They have the coaches back a lot more than we do. And so I think for the time being, we just kind of have to weigh this thing out, keep examining it, keep watching it. But again, with the way Cleveland is playing this year, I'm not sure that there's any coach out there who's just going to instantly make us into a magical title contender any more than we already are. If Thibodeau continues to struggle in a second round series, like if we get gentlemen swept or regular swept by Boston in the second round and all the games are the same as these have been, then I think then that's a completely legitimate course of action, and I think that's one the front office will look at. But I think knee-jerk reactions, emotional responses, I don't really agree with. I think you can make a case that he's done some things, especially with Deuce McBride's minutes, that have don't really match up with the lineup data. I think Deuce has proved he deserves to be on the court more. I'm not really sure why that isn't happening, but yeah, a lot of people smarter than me about basketball have been saying that. XJ and Jeff over Hot Hand Theory, if you ever watch them, they're big proponents of that, and they're very smart. So I tend to trust their takes on things, but at the same time, we have a level of competence with this team that we haven't seen in a long time, and Thibodeau is a big reason for it. So just if you're going to make that change, you got to make sure that you have the right guy coming in to replace him. It's because I don't think you can just replace him with one of our assistants or somebody who's not coached before and automatically think that it's going to work out roses just because it worked that way for Golden State when they got rid of Mark Jackson, or insert situation like Nick Nurse in Toronto replacing Dwayne Casey. There are other examples I'm sure I'm missing, but that just because that's happened, that doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be the right course for us.
And I think Tibbs has noticed that about Deuce, because if you think about the only halftime adjustment that he's made this year is starting Deuce, and I think he's done it 3 times or already. Where Deuce didn't start the game, but he started in the second half. And I think we're 2-1 in those situations. So he's definitely recognized it in game at that. But I don't know if there's calls for it to be a hard change. You know what I mean? A full-time change. But I agree. I was just talking to Queen. Queen put me on the Hot Hand Theory. Shout out to them. I like this stuff, and I'm with you on that.
I will say this about Thibodeau. Just because the team is not winning doesn't mean the game plan or lost, I should say, to Cleveland and Boston, doesn't mean the game plan wasn't solid. It could be the team didn't execute. And it can also be that they tried to execute, but they're just not good enough to execute the game plan. So to me, any talk about Thibodeau being fired at this point because we are losing to teams that are better than us, I just don't get it. Now, if you want to talk about how we're losing, and maybe it's on the coach that he's not motivating them enough, all right. I mean, we can have that, we can have that conversation. But
Down
when
the
it comes
line.
but when it comes to Boston, to me, the Knicks are just not good enough. Period. I don't care what the game plan is. The Knicks are not good enough. 2, I think the Knicks can be a better defensive team. I've seen them do it for stretches of in a game. I've seen them do it for stretches of games. But I don't think that they are committed, and particularly Karl-Anthony Towns. Now, the question I have is, do you think the Knicks just will never be a good defensive team because of Towns and Brunson? 1. And 2, do you think it's too much to ask of Brunson? At least tries.
And I feel like he's been getting better.
Yes. I think Towns, if it's a one-on-one matchup, he's better. Even laterally, I've seen him move his feet out on the perimeter. I'm not saying he would be able to if you consistently had him out on the perimeter guarding, whether or not he would be, but I've seen him, you know, do it a few times. Is Cat a poor team defender? Because this is really what my
Mhm.
concern is, that sometimes he won't rotate where he needs to rotate. Sometimes a player is coming right after him at him. He just takes a step back. And sometimes I see shades of Randall.
I
I'm
was
like,
just gonna ask you, is he worse than Randall? I was just gonna ask you that, Queen.
these shades of Randall of just stepping out the way or not rotating over. So I guess the question is, can the Knicks be better defensively with Brunson and Cat? And could Cat be better defensively? Or is this, I've seen him be better. So I'm starting to think this is just choice. Now, is
Mm.
it that his usage is up so much that he's afraid of getting into foul trouble? He just doesn't have that much energy to produce on the offensive end and the defensive end. I don't. What's your thoughts? To me, I think Cat could be better than he is with his team defense. He can be better. Tony, we'll start with you this time, and then Jeff.
It's a small sample size. I do think he could be better. It's a small sample size, but when he's not going to drop coverage and when he's actually switching, I think that that helps us as a team a
Right.
lot more than how detrimental the drop coverage has been. Because the drop coverage, number one, he's not a great good rim protector, so the drop coverage is kind of ineffective in that sense. And then the second part is when he's in drop, it puts more, it makes it hard for the guards and wings to recover because you know what I mean, they're letting the guards penetrate more, the guy they're guarding penetrate a little bit deeper. So I think switching with Cat might help him defensively a lot more than the drop coverage that we've been seeing, and we've been hearing. If you watch a bunch of different podcasts, we've been hearing about drop coverage for like all season long. You know what I mean? Before I even recognized it visually watching it, I've been hearing people talk about it. Now I'm starting to see it, but I've also seen in that Boston game, third quarter, two possessions where he switched and they ended up being stops. Again, very tiny sample size, but it's something that I'm watching for now. Um, can as far as and then Brunson, I mean, he's getting better. He's not he does we don't have the same issue with Brunson that we have with Cat, where we're
Right.
questioning effort, where we're questioning you know what I mean? It's just liability, it, things that he out of his control with size and things of that nature when it comes to Brunson. But even with his size, I feel like he's getting better. Again, small sample size, but the two plays in that Boston game, one I think was against KP where he got a stop, great defense. KP forced up a bad shot, missed it. We got and the other one was a offensive foul. I think that one was on Tatum. So you know what I mean? I do agree with you, Queen, where you say maybe it's the effort lacking. Um, and maybe that's because of how much they rely on the offensive end. Yeah, you know what I mean?
I agree with you. I think Brunson defense is underrated. I see him fighting over screens. He doesn't die on screens. He moves laterally. You know, he'll hit whoever he's guarding. You know, has to pick up the dribble because he cuts off the drive. I think he's average to maybe slightly below average defender. Cat, I don't know what the hell Cat is doing out there. And I'm not talking about one-on-one defense. I'm talking about his team defense. I'm not sure what's going on, but I've seen him in multiple games play better team defense. So I know he knows how to do it. He's just not committed to team defense. Is he tired? Is it his usage? Is it he's trying to get out of, he doesn't want to get into foul trouble? I'm not sure what it is, but he can be better. His team defense can be better than it is. Jeff, do you agree with that? Or do you feel like, nah, he's just not really that good team wise?
Kind of agree with both of those things. I don't think he's that good, but I think he can be better. Um, I think both of those things are true. You know, the Knicks are not going to have an elite defense no matter who you have. When you have two guys you can target, one as a big and one as a small, in a lineup, three guys are not going to be able to make up the difference on that. You can hide one guy, but in the modern NBA, shooters are so good, it's awfully difficult to hide two. You know, and the problem with Brunson is specifically against Boston, all those guys are 6'5" and above. They could just shoot over him. Like there's, as Tony said, that, you know, he can't just grow taller. Like that's not, you know, he's 6'2" and that's his media guide height. I'm not sure that on the court he doesn't look, he looks shorter than that to me. But you know, and Deuce is about the same size as well. So we have problems with, you know, and the whole too small thing with the Knicks. We hear it a lot, and that much is true. And then when you combine that with a guy that you can just put in a basic pick and roll action like Towns, and, you know, it's really easy for him to get lost or confused or not try, whatever the case may be. I'm not sure, you know, you can pick your own reasons why you think that's happening. I don't want to speculate. I'm not sure. I think it's probably a little bit of all of those things, but you know, when you combine those things, it makes it awfully difficult, even with really good wing defenders like Bridges and Anunoby.
Yeah, Cat on the pick and roll with KP. I'm like, listen, let Drew Holiday or whoever it is turn the corner and let somebody else rotate over and stop the drive. Why are you leaving KP? Is that the scheme, to leave KP to come over and stop the drive, knowing it's just an easy pass to KP? Like no. On that pick and roll, I'm staying with KP, and I'm gonna look and just watch whoever it is drive by and hope that there's somebody else who rotates over. I mean, like, and he did that so many times.
Hey, Queen, you know I'm a Tibbs supporter, but I think this is what some of the Tibbs haters pinpoint at. I think it is the scheme. I
In
think
fairness, KP was 6 of 15 from the field.
But you can't rotate that. Like, so this is the thing though. Is it scheme or is it execution? Like, that's the scheme, Cat, for you to be so far out of the, and if that was the scheme, let's just say if that was the scheme, then you cannot tell me that opposite wing's role is not to get to KP. It's one or the other.
you're right. You're right.
Yeah,
One or
Because
the other.
100%.
to Tibbs' credit, that's what he says. We're not, you know what I mean? You got to rotate faster. You got to get back. So it is the scheme, but he's also expecting you to get back, or he's expecting the next man to rotate. You know what I mean? So it is the lack of execution of the scheme, but it's also, you know what I mean? I think two things can be true. If they're not executing the scheme, people expect Tibbs to change the scheme. You know what I mean? And Tibbs says, "This is the scheme. I know
No,
it
but I'm
works."
not changing the scheme
I
if I feel that scheme matches what Boston does. You got to execute that.
well, and that's the flip side too, because I don't think the scheme is predicated off of Boston. I think that's Tibbs' scheme, period. And he expects you to rotate. He expects you to recover. You know what I mean? So again, the people that don't like Tibbs, this is what they point to. They point to the scheme as opposed to what you're asking. Are they executing it to perfection and it's just not working? Which I don't think is the case either.
Yeah. Let me get to the super chats. Paris Duggar. We did that one. We did that one. All right. The 7-7. Knicks are the only team with two all-star starters. That is correct. Red Wong, appreciate the super chat. Tibbs is doing an awful job, an awful coaching job. This team wins off pure talent, no coaching. He hasn't outcoached anyone, but we always see there he get outcoached. All right, I hear you. Paris Duggar, Cleveland players said the teaching of detail for each guy's role is why they're much better. Critical thinking, timing cuts to get open, the awareness. But that's the same thing they say about um, Thibodeau. If you hear the players talk about Thibodeau and how detailed the game plans are, Randall said that. People on last year's team said that. Players on this year's team said that. That is not a lack of them not knowing what they're supposed to be doing. And maybe, somebody, I think it was Greg who said, I don't know if it was in this chat or Tony show, maybe the players have stopped playing for Tom Thibodeau. Do you guys sense any of that?
I don't think you can say that if, to Jeff's point, listen to what the players say. So if they stop playing for him, they're saying the opposite. You know what I mean? Publicly, and any chance they get, whether it's a podcast, a post game, a pre game. You know what I mean? They're always defending him. I would think they would be a little bit more mum. They may not have to say anything negative, but they're definitely not going to be singing his praises and then internally not buying in or feel he's lost them.
Mm-hmm. The 718 said, it's not they don't like Tibbs, it's we don't like the scheme. Okay. Okay.
Well, one thing that's true, regardless of the scheme that you run, when you're talking about team defense, you got one player that misses their assignment, that team defense is going to break down. And a lot of times we'll have two players, and it's not always Brunson and Cat. Sometimes it's Josh Hart that misses a rotation, or is Alpha and La La Land is not where he needs to be. Sometimes it's Bridges doesn't do a good job fighting over a screen. Sometimes it's the fact that one of our guys gets caught on a screen on down low and can't get through. So I appreciate the not liking the scheme, and if you want to modernize the Knicks defense, okay, that's something that we can have a discussion about, but that's not something you're going to do mid-season for sure. I mean, they don't have the practice time to be able to institute a completely new defensive scheme. You might be able to put in a player or two here or there, for a little bit, but if you're expecting the Knicks to go zone or something like that in the next, couple of months, you're going to be sorely disappointed, and the crazy thing is, I'm wondering if the Knicks are just a little too comfortable in Tom Thibodeau's system. You know how sometimes you kind of get used to a coach and it's like, yeah, he's going to yell at us about this, but at the end of the day, we could, you know what I mean? You kind of know how much you can get away with at a certain point. Right. I'm wondering if sometimes the Knicks are guilty of that. You know what I mean? Just, not executing at 100% because they know that most of the time they can get away with 85, and still, keep Tibbs happy or whatever. I don't know that that's the case either, but
right.
But I'm glad you asked that question, because I was thinking the same thing, because it does seem like in certain games this year we haven't had the same, and it's not all the time either. It's just in certain matchups and in certain games, it's just kind of been like, who are these Knicks? This isn't the team that I recognize from last year for sure, but different set of guys too.
Yeah. Nick Yak, shout out to Nick Yak. He said Cat's defense against top 10 teams is 128 points per 100 possessions last, is why he needs to go to power forward 15 minutes with Mitch. I mean, listen, I'm all for that. I'm all for Towns playing some, power forward minutes. I wonder if he's playing 30 power forward minutes, how that might help our defense, but at how much expense to the offense? right? And that we don't know, and we're not going to know until it happens. I think that's on Thibodeau. Like I'm super like curious at how Thibodeau uses Mitch, how he uses when he decides to use them together, when he decides to play Cat more, when does he decide to play Mitch more? Is he going to be really flexible on the Mitch, depending on the lineup, or is he going to just be like, all right, we're going to just start Mitch and Cat no matter what the lineups are.
And how long
Offense
does it
be
take?
damned, you know?
How long does it take for them to get acclimated with each other? You know what I mean? Like, because that's a learning curve in itself. You know what I mean? So I mean, Cat might be able to find some remnants of what he had in Minnesota, so it may not be as hard for him. Um, and honestly, for the team, there's a chance it works out fine, just because Mitch has been here before. So collectively, I mean, I know it's a lot of new players, but you know it can work with Mitch at the center, and you can conceivably say Cat is a better player than Randall, and if it worked with its flaws there, why wouldn't it work better? You know what I mean, with Towns in that spot as opposed to Randall. Quicker decision maker, better shooter, better passer. You know what I mean? Like, so theoretically, it should work, but how long does it take to, like, it's not going to be an immediate switch. You know what I mean? Oh, Mitch is back. It works. I think they still got to work through that as well.
And when you say work, what do you mean by work?
I mean, we were. If you think of Randall next to Mitchell Robinson,
Mhm.
and whether it was, I'm not saying it was ideal, but we were a winning team. That those two guys, as clunky as it was, or whatever the naysayers said about them two together, the spacing, this, that, and the third, it still produced wins. So I'm saying, if those two produced wins together, why wouldn't Cat next to Randall produce wins together? Considering Cat is more efficient and does a lot of the same things Randall did, just
Better.
more efficiently. So I think it should work. It's just a matter of them kind of meshing it together and clicking.
The
Your
million
thoughts,
dollar
Jeff?
question, though, is does it
Mhm.
work against Cleveland and Boston? Because
No.
that's really what we're talking about here, isn't it? I mean, because everybody else we're handling pretty well. I think everybody would agree. So, does the inclusion of Mitchell Robinson work against Cleveland and Boston? And that's,
I think more so against one it will, and I think Boston, we got to figure something else out.
Right.
You
I
know what I
agree with
mean?
you. I think it can work against Cleveland just because we've seen Robinson give those two big guys fits. Assuming he's strong, has the requisite levels of strength and everything that he did in the playoffs a couple of years ago, he was a problem for both of those guys last year or 2 years ago. But in terms of Boston, I just don't see the value added there from the rim protection when you got a team that all they want to do is sit outside and shoot 3-pointers anyway.
Right.
And I actually think that one of the things the Knicks can do to be more effective against Boston is to actually shoot more 3-pointers. And if Mitchell Robinson is on the floor, you've got a non-shooter, non-threat. So to me, I think, especially against the Celtics, I think you got to try and play small and have your best shooters out on the floor as much as you possibly can. And if that means less minutes for Josh Hart and
Right.
losing the rebounding battle, then maybe those are things that you have to live with.
Right.
But you know,
That's that means no Josh. That means no Mitchell Robinson against Boston. That means no Josh Hart. That means no Precious Achua. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you, because I think they
Who
exploit.
you starting at center? So you putting OG at the
yeah,
center?
I mean,
You
I don't have.
playing no Towns either?
No, I think you have to have Towns. You definitely have to
you
have
play
Towns.
cat for sure.
Oh, okay.
I think I think the argument, honestly, like, I think it is Deuce. You know what I mean? I think it is Deuce. Um, but that you can't do that for 48 minutes. I mean, Tibbs might, but
Well, but you have other shooters. In other words,
Damn it.
you potentially could. I mean, maybe not so with this year's team, but Campaign has been a pretty consistent 3-point shooter, and he's not afraid. Deuce is certainly going to take his share of threes. Landry Shamet used to be a good 3-point shooter. I don't know if that will ever return to the fold, but what I'm saying is play as many of those shooters along with we know Brunson is a great 3-point shooter. We know OG can shoot the corners. We know McHale can shoot the corners. So there's, in other words, you're talking about 7 or 8 man rotation in the postseason anyway. So you can have a lineup that always has shooting surrounding, shooting on the court at all time. And even if you have to play Josh Hart with that if he's the only guy that isn't a plus shooter, I think you can manage that pretty well.
I agree. But that's an adjustment that I'm just saying. I don't know if Tibbs restructures his 8-man rotation or whatever and takes, I mean, he could take Precious out. I guess he could take. Mitchell Robinson hasn't been here all year, so theoretically, I agree. He's gonna have to recognize that Tibbs to say, "All right, this might be my best chance. I need shooting at every position at all times against Boston."
Because what I'm saying, whatever we're doing now isn't working. So let's try something else. If you send the shooting out there and we get clobbered on the boards and we lose by 40 points, what difference does it make from what we're doing? At least give it a shot and see what it looks like, and it may work. And the more that they have to rotate and do things defensively and stay out on shooters, the better opportunities that Brunson and Cat are going to have.
I don't disagree at all.
Yeah, and then you can always, you can always go back, switch it up. Just sticking with the defense. Do you think the idea of 3 defenders around around Brunson and Cat, is that a good strategy that's just not working yet? Is that we don't have the right 3 players around them? And one I hate to ask, is Towns the best player to put with Brunson?
I mean, I think you still talk about defense when you talk about those two. I think, and are we talking about in general, or are we talking about Boston, Cleveland still?
We talk,
because again, like Jeff said, with Boston, Cleveland, now I think you need the defense, but you need the shooting. So
right.
I think ideally, again, it goes to Deuce for Boston specifically, because you don't necessarily lose anything defensively. He gives up some size, obviously, but you can live with that. They got. I don't think I think he can match up, with a Drew Holiday and with a White if you have to, and it not be necessarily detrimental. Brunson's gonna have to take the other one, but you need defense and shooting, like, because it's less to exploit.
Well, I'm just talking about just in terms of the roster construction to win a championship. And that could be, I'm not sure how much. I hear what you're saying. With Deuce is something we can do this season.
Mm-hmm.
But just overall, or is it just too early? Is it just too early to tell? Because I'm just having questions about whether or not those 3 guys, you would think that would be enough. 3 two-way players. I don't even know if you would consider Josh. I don't know if you would consider Josh a two-way player, but I do. He just doesn't stretch the defense enough consistently, I guess.
I think the real question, like, is there a better option in that starting unit, like outside of the Knicks? Probably, but it's not. But it's not. I don't think it's like a guy that you could just easily go out there and obtain or get. You know what I mean? Like, because ideally you would want size, right? So you would maybe want the guy to be at minimum 6'6" or 7 or 6'8", and then you want him to be able to shoot and defend. And it's not many of like we got 2 of them, and we thought that was enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're gonna keep Brunson and Towns as the 2 guys you're building around, you might have to go out and get a power forward if you want to keep Towns at the center and move OG to 3 and keep Bridges at the 2. I'm not sure unless the Towns that we think can play better team defense actually does it.
Does his defense get better at the 4? I think that's another ideal question that we got to answer.
I mean, it's possible he has to defend in space, but he did that in Minnesota. But see, this is the thing, and I think people disagree with me on this. Moving him to the 4 for how long? If you're moving him to the 4 for 10, 12, 14 minutes a game, I'm with that. If you're moving him to the 4, period, then who are you putting at the 5? Because I'm not a big proponent of Mitchell Robinson and Cat 5-4 for the entire game.
I mean, just if it's starting, it doesn't have to be the entire game either. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like
That's what I'm saying. How many minutes? It doesn't matter to me.
yeah,
It doesn't matter whether it's
yeah.
starting or whatever. It's just
You
how many
saying
minutes together. It doesn't matter whether it's starting or.
I guess that depends on where we see it, how effective it is. You know what I mean? What do we lose in it? Like you got now you got to weigh it. You know what I mean?
Correct.
What are the perks and what are the negatives, and then which one weighs more? You know what I mean?
And then what's the difference in the playoffs? Because you might be able to get away with it in the regular season and not be able to get away with it in the playoffs. Like Cleveland is getting away with Jarrett Jack and Mobley in the regular season, but in the playoffs, they might have to go with Mobley at the center. Right? Because otherwise you could just play Jared Allen off the floor because he doesn't stretch, or you could use his guy to roam and do different things. But Cleveland is set up where you put Mobley at the 5, you put DeAndre Hunter at the 4, and you might still be cooking, we put Towns at the 5, we put OG at the 4, we right back where we right back where we are right now, which,
I mean, it depends on if someone else is also being brought in too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? A third wing, a third wing stop.
Well, I think part of the issue is I don't think OG is really a 4. Like he's a 4 for us, but I said this to Queen before the show in the back. I kind of feel like he's a 3, and I kind of feel like Mikal
I agree.
Is Mikal's a 2, but I think he's almost a 3 also. I think there's a lot of redundancy right there right now, and there's a little bit of versatility there. I think Bridges is better guarding small guys, and OG's better guarding a little bigger guy. So there's a little bit of difference there, but I think their skill sets overlap quite a bit, and so ideally, when I envisioned Bridges on this team, I kind of thought that his ability to create off the dribble with his shot and the mid-range would give us a different look from those 2 guys. You know what I mean? So more of a disparity, but we don't see a lot of that from Bridges. I don't feel like. I mean, he does it on occasion, but and then the 3-point shooting hasn't been really reliable either. So it's kind of been tough to really, like, I don't think we've seen what we hoped Bridges would be to this point. I'm not saying he can't ever get to that point, but for right now, I just don't feel like, at least to me, this isn't the Mikal that I envisioned with this group of guys. I kind of thought he would be a lot more dynamic than he is, and as opposed to what we're seeing from Anunoby, who's not dynamic either.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was evident against Boston. We all five of our players have to be cooking, and those two guys just haven't been. And I agree. I would like to use Bridges a little different. We was talking about this on the other show, Jeff. So now Bridges is handling the ball. Now Hart becomes a liability, right? Because Hart handling the ball means that his guy has to guard him, right? He's handling the ball, in pick and rolls. His guy can't just, play off of him. Now Bridges is handling the ball. Where's Josh Hart now? In the corner. If I'm his guy, obviously his guy can't sit in the middle of the key. That's defensive 3 seconds. But I was watching the Boston game. Whoever was playing Precious had 1 foot in the key. So you're not technically in the middle of the key clogging it up, but it's easier to rotate when you already got 1 foot in the key, right? It's just less space. So I mean, that's going to be the issue with Mitchell Robinson as well. But to Tony's point, are we getting so much more on the defensive end that it makes up? Like, is it a net positive?
And again, so I agree, when Hart is on the floor, you can't really do that, but Bridges doesn't have to play 40 minutes either, and you can stagger it in such a way that he does get more than, because I don't really think about it is the Hart and Towns is the best pick and roll combination in the NBA, like statistically this year, or that, at least it was before this weekend, or one of them. So surprisingly so. And so, that's something that the Knicks need to continue. I think we need to continue to run all sorts of creative pick and rolls. I don't think we utilize that nearly enough in our scheme. And if teams are going to play us where they're sagging off this one or that one, getting Hart into a pick and roll action negates a lot of the advantage that you would get by doing that, because he's proven that he can finish well at the rim and do some stuff when he gets the ball as a roller, but he's also very good at passing the ball and getting the ball back. If you're going to do a pick and pop, there's a lot of versatility there. So I think we need to rely on the pick and roll more than we do.
Yeah, for sure. Shout out to Paris Duggar. Brunson and Cat only need a 3-out offense anyway. I mean, we go through this all the damn time. Brunson and Cat can score on anybody. You could clog the middle and we have Mitch, RJ Barrett, Randall. And when I say clog the middle, obviously I don't mean that the guys are right in the middle, but they're around the vicinity of the key, so it's easier for them, to rotate on drives and things of that sort. These guys can score regardless. That's not the point. The point is the space it creates for the other guys. But I can't tell you how many times I've said that. Anybody else have any comment on that, or we could just?
Are you a threat is the question, right? Boston is killer because all 5 guys on the floor, it doesn't matter if they're playing Horford and Hauser. All 5 guys, as Tony rightly said, all 5 guys can let it fly, and they're all dangerous. Pritchard was a non-factor in the last game against Boston. The previous time he scorched us for 30. So you have to respect and you have to guard all of them. If you have a Randall, an RJ, Mitch on the court at the same time in the playoffs, and look, these teams haven't even gotten to scheme for us yet, right? Yeah. If you're talking about playing them in the playoffs, it's going to get amped up and it's going to be more restrictive, not less. And so you're going to have to find ways to open up the floor where where Cat and Brunson can score easily. It's not just a matter of, yeah, Brunson had 22 and Cat had 24. They still got theirs, but they struggled for everything that they got, and they neither one of them shot for a great percentage. Neither one of them got to the free throw line very much, so they weren't getting easy points, and that amplifies your struggles on the other end of the floor. Because if you're having to work your tail off on this end of the floor, and we're giving up freebies, Ole, defense on the other end, that's just not a recipe for winning. So in the modern NBA, especially, like I don't think you can get away with 3 out, as he said. I think you've got to have at least 4 shooters on the floor at all times in order to beat the elite teams in the NBA.
Correct. Thank you, Jeff. Everybody has to be a threat. So you got Josh Hart and Precious in the game. Those guys are not big threats. So their guy is going to be in the key a little bit, making it harder for Brunson and Cat. Will they still score? Yes, but it's going to be harder for them. We saw, think about last year. Brunson had the 5,000 dribbles in the key, twist, turn, pirouettes, and then get off his shot, right? Whereas with the spacing, he just gets right into the key for a layup. OG just cuts right into the key, gets the ball, a layup. That's the difference. It's strategy. The more players you have that can command attention, the easier it's going to be for everybody. Yeah, Paris Duggar. We'll see when the playoffs come. But it's a fair point that our defense is so bad that when we have to put in the pressures or we have to put in a mitch, our offense is going to take a hit. But it might be worth it. Mm-hmm. You understand? I mean, this is the juggling that Tom Thibodeau is going to have to do in the playoffs. It's because their Cat is one way. He's not and then Mitch is the exact opposite. You know what I mean?
And for a game, it doesn't have to be a series. It really only has to be a game. You know what I mean? A game at a time where a Precious, all right, you got to punish them. Like, this is what they're doing. If you want to play, you have to punish them when they do this. Or Josh Hart, if they're going to give you the shot, you got to punish them. You got to take it. You know what I mean? Like, you got to make them second guess their strategy.
Right. Oh, there was another super chat. I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Paris Duggar, I would have had Hulk playing with Cat 40 games by now so we can rebound, challenge more shots. Huck, Porty, and Sims was here. Both had good perimeter. Stop it. Like, Paris Duggar, come on. Like, are you understanding what we're trying to say? I get it. The defense will be better, but the offense takes a hit because you don't have to play Huck Porty or Sims. You don't have to play any of those guys. So their guy makes it harder for the rest of them. And I get it. We're in a situation where that's just what we're going to have to do. And we're just going to have to live with it. But I just want you to understand that it does impact the offense, particularly in the playoffs, when you have somebody that doesn't command attention. I don't know how many times we have to say this the same thing. And Huck Porty, to say it mildly, needs a little more seasoning.
Yeah.
He needs a little more seasoning.
I think over time that could work. You know what I mean? But we're talking about a rookie. We're talking about entrusting a rookie. And it's not just Thibodeau, but even entrusting a rookie, you know what I mean? That takes time. It takes time for you to garner that trust for somebody, and especially when you have, contending aspirations. I think he could be right. You know what I mean? It's not saying you're wrong, and you know what I mean, because that could be true, and he might, Huck Porty might even be, over time, a more a better option than Mitch, considering I think he has a little bit more offensive, to skills to his game, but
Mhm.
that still has to be developed. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right,
That still
right.
has to be curated, and you know what I mean. So again, that
I'm
takes
high on Hawk Porty. I'm just not high on him this season.
yeah,
But I think you just unwrapped why the Knicks are so far behind Cleveland and Boston. Because when we put in our all offensive lineup, our defense suffers to the point where they kill it. And when we compensate for that by putting in our defensive guys, then our offense suffers to the point where it's the same issues are coming up on the flip side. So either way that we haven't found a mesh point where we can combine our folks together where we're stopping one problem or the other. And so it's just stacking one on top of the other, and that's what's leading to these lopsided ball
Right.
games.
yep.
Because
You got
Boston
you
can play both sides, and
exactly.
and Cleveland, listen, even with Donovan Mitchell, in that lineup, you know, I get that's just one player.
And those guys have grown. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, Cleveland. You talk about Mobley. He's doing step in threes now. You know what I mean? It's like 30 something, 30, mid 30%, but that's a step up. And now he becomes a threat on a perimeter, which he wasn't so much in the past. Allen, he's not a perimeter threat, but his offensive skills hasn't increased. You know what I mean? Now he got the little iHeart floater in the lane. You know what I mean? Like, so he's evolved
Right.
offensively, but
Right.
he wasn't that 2 years ago.
Right. And
He had
and
to
right.
he
This
had
is
to
not
grow
the
into
same
that.
team from two
Look
years
at
ago.
Luke Kennett.
Right.
That's not the Luke Kennett that was on the Knicks 5 years ago.
Right. Right.
You know what I mean? Even though I did like him back then, and I thought,
Right.
you know what I mean, he had potential to grow, but he had to grow into that
Right.
and be entrusted into that.
Yeah. I want to put this comment up because I've seen this a few times. Nick Yak, the last 2 years, the Knicks led the league in paint points. So it's just an opinion that Mitch is a clog by some fans, but doesn't hold up to stats. I don't understand how leading the league in paint points has anything to do with clogging the lane. Does anybody
We lead the league in paint points we did because that's where Randall and Brunson do a lot of their damage from. Like Brunson is, I mean, he's 6'1 and a half, but he's a post player. He knows how to work inside and kill you with his footwork. Randall was the same way. Randall loved it inside, especially last year in January. That he was killing it in there. So,
Oh,
I
I
don't
I
know.
get it. I think he's saying that how were they able to do that if Mitch was clogging the lane? I will just say that it's harder. It's harder for them. They had to score in tighter spots, and they had to work a little harder. Whereas with Cat, there's much more space, and so it's easier for Brunson to score, and it's easier for Hart, who's having a career year, and it's easier for OG, and it's easier for Bridges
Don't
as
forget
well.
Robinson missed 50 games last year, and when Ihart is in there, he's got that floater game
That's
as
true.
Tony said. So that changes that equation quite a bit also.
That's
Like
true. He missed a lot of games. So they had more games in which there was space. Listen, I'm not saying that they can't score with Mitchell Robinson there. I'm just saying it's just a little tighter. That's all I'm saying. It's a little tighter, and they gotta have to work a little harder, but it's possible.
you're
That's all I'm
muted, Tone.
No, I was just saying we had to win games differently when we had that approach. You know what I
right.
mean? Like at that point, now the offensive rebounds was
Was
the
big.
identity. That's what kept us winning games and in games, and you know what I mean. So yeah, it, he's basically making the same point I was saying earlier. Like if it worked with Randall and Mitch, it should still work with Cat and Mitch. You know what I mean?
In the
At
regular
least
season.
At least that's the way I'm looking at what he said. But it also changes other things. You know what I mean? It's give and pull.
Right.
You take something away and improve something here, but you lose something here, and then you gotta weigh your options. How
Correct.
much? What's the net
Correct.
value afterwards?
But
Correct.
at least you have options.
Right.
A lot of times where we don't. A lot of times this year we haven't had, especially when our bench was completely decimated by injury. We just didn't have a lot of options. It was like, well, you're playing because you're who we have.
Yeah. All right. So this week coming up, we're playing Philadelphia Wednesday, right? Then we're at home. A shit show, but they'll get their shit together for the Knicks. So I anticipate it's going to be a good game. Um, then we are at Memphis on Friday, I believe, and then at Miami on Sunday. I believe that is. So it's a tough week. Now, the Knicks, even though we've lost these two games, I think the Knicks have been what 8-3 or won 8 out of their last 11 or something.
We're 6-4 in our last 10. I know that.
6-4 out of the last 10. Okay, all right. Thoughts on this week? Miami. Jimmy Butler is now in Golden State. Wiggins is in. Miami. Miami is. I'll tell you right now what place they are. Miami is in 8th place, 26-29. They're just 3-7 over their last 10, and they lost their last game. Memphis is third in the Western Conference, 37-20, 6-4 over their last 10. They've lost one. And who else we're playing? Philly, 20-36, 1-9 over their last 10, and they've lost 7 games, which means they coming in hot.
Yep.
the Knicks better be ready. Embiid, they're thinking about getting a second opinion on the knee, and I guess maybe shutting him down for the season. I think he's only played 9-10 games this season. When he does play, he plays well though. You know how it goes with the Knicks. You miss 20 games, and then you come out of your coma, you play the Knicks, and then the next thing you know,
then they bury you the next day.
Oh boy. Just thoughts on this upcoming week.
First off, I'm upset because it looks like I'm gonna miss the most of all of these games because I'll be at work for all of these games, which is like 2 or 3 weeks in a row that I'm missing every game. So that sucks. I agree with you. Philly's probably gonna have one of their best games of the year, considering how bad they've been, and it's against us. We can't lose to Memphis because now that narrative extends to we can't beat the top teams out there, right? Because what are they, third in the West?
Mm-hmm. Memphis is third. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just
Denver made they push. They're in second now.
Good for them.
9 out of 10. They only lost to
9 out of 10. Yeah.
Crazy.
And obviously, Miami's gonna give us their best shot as well, regardless of how what their record is over the last 10 games or whatever. Like they AFC, they're trying to solidify themselves as a play off team as opposed to play in team.
Mm-hmm.
So they always dangerous. This is this is not a sleeper week. The competition has went down considerably from last week, but the good thing is we always tend to bounce back. You know what I mean? Like there's no way we're not playing with a chip on our shoulder or low energy coming up for these two national TV top team. You know what I mean? Blowouts. Like we have to come back with it. May not be the statement, but we have to come back with a statement. You know what I mean? It's not a statement win, statement game, but we need to make a statement with these next 3 games. So get rid of Philly early is the objective. Have them out the game early and questioning and playing they two-way guys or whatever the case. Memphis is the bigger test, and you can't ever take the Heat lightly. But it's not an
And
easy
it's
road.
Sunday. I don't think we've won a Sunday game all season long. I
Is
think
it
we're
matinee too? Don't tell me it's matinee.
I don't think it's a matinee.
All right, because that's the other thing. I haven't mentioned that about that Boston game, but we don't fare well at 1:00 games, 12:00 games. I think we did better this year than ever in the past, but I hate those.
I think it's a 5:00 start, so
it's a little better, but
start somewhere in there.
Any key? I think the Knicks are 3-0 this week. Anything any keys to the games? Anything particular you would like to see from the Knicks this upcoming week?
I would love to see Mitchell Robinson come back and play against Embiid. No dirty plays, but I would like for Mitchell Robinson to get revenge against Embiid. It's whether play him. I don't care if you hobble. You know what I mean? Just go out there.
He does that, and Embiid's just gonna flip him over on his leg again and break his up.
I don't think there's any way that Embiid could do any type of dirty plays like that again. I think he got his pass, especially considering the ramifications that it had on our team. I don't think he could even, play around with any dirty plays anymore. Not against us. You know what I mean? So I listen. I'll find and beat myself if he. I might could take him with his
Big
knees
Tony gonna get a crowbar to the knees for a Mr. Embiid if
be like what's her name? Tanya Harding. That was her. Don't play.
No, don't do that, man. You'll go to prison for that mess. We need you here.
Yeah.
Hey, I'll be a Knicks legend.
You already a Knick legend. You don't need to do that.
Anything else, Jeff, you looking forward to or would like to see? Healthy,
like how Karl-Anthony Towns. I think that makes a big difference in how these games go. And then, I'd like to see our bench continue to play well. I want to see guys like Shamet and Campaign and even Precious, have games where they thrive and play a 9-man rotation so some of those other guys can get some more rest. But basically, I worried about Josh Hart's knee. Cat kind of was hobbled at the end of that last game, so I'm kind of concerned about that. And I'm concerned about winning on Sunday because we've never done that, it seems like, this season. So those are my concerns. I'll say 1-2 so that we'll do better than 1-2. But if I predict 2-1 or better, then it's going to go south. So I got to go with 1-2, but hopefully we'll do better than that.
Yeah. Yeah. We shall see. Shout out to the chat. Appreciate everybody. Nick Gag, East Blue Drew, on Deals NYK. I appreciate you always repping JJ, Juan B, East Blue Drew, Virgo Smith, Mark White, Parrish Duggar, Andrew K was in the building. Did I miss this one? Fred Wong, keep it simple. Did I mention this one? Put Cat on the block, let him work, and when the double team comes, kick it out and swing it to the open man. This is just basic basketball.
I ain't gonna lie. I would love for us to run more of the offense through Karl-Anthony Towns,
especially early in the game.
Yeah, I mean, try it. Because I don't see how it could go wrong, and it can only open up more doors for us as a team. Get Brunson some more off-ball shots. You know what I mean? Utilize our cutters, Josh Hart, Mikal, and and OG. I think they all are terrific cutters, and give them, give the opposing team some more things to think about. Like, now, it's been kind of repetitive, and um, everything is kind of going through Brunson, and he's the guy that's gonna make the decision on, who eats out there. It'd be nice to just add a new wrinkle.
Maybe Tibbs is saving it for the playoffs.
I
Be
keep
real
hearing
vanilla
that.
during the regular season, and then come playoff time, you bring it out, and they don't have tape on it.
I keep hearing that. I mean, if so, I just hope it's being utilized enough in practice that you've seen the capabilities of it. But yeah, I've heard a few people say that.
Yeah. All right. Any last words before we get out of here?
Great show.
Amen.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is good to be back. Um, for those who came in late, our Trautwig, who did a lot of Nick games, passed away today. We did a moment of silence for him earlier. Um, earlier in the show.
R.I.P. Mr. Trautwig. Prayers for the
Yeah.
family.
Yeah, condolences to his family. All right, Tony, I appreciate you. Jeff, I appreciate you. Everybody in the chat. Thursday, 9 p.m. Right? The Knicks don't play Thursday. Yep, 9 p.m. The Just Nicking It weekly show. Me, Jeff, Ajay, Jarrell, and whoever else wants to join us. Appreciate you guys. Until next time.